Welcome back to Auth Explained, Episode 4. So far, we've talked a lot about JWTs, but today we're rewinding to the classic approach that came long before them. Sessions and cookies. This is the original answer to one deceptively simple question. How does a website actually remember who you are between requests? Let's build that mental model from the ground up. And the root of the problem is this: HTTP itself has no memory. Every single request arrives at the server like a total stranger knocking on the door. You log in, you add an item to your cart, you click to the next page, and suddenly the cart is empty because the server has already forgotten you exist. So something has to carry your identity along for the ride. Cookies will end up carrying the proof, and sessions will store the details. So let's pin down the definitions in one clean sentence. A cookie is a small piece of data your browser tucks away and quietly sends back with every request. Think of it as the ticket in your pocket. A session, on the other hand, is the matching record the server keeps about you, sitting safely on its side. The cookie is the claim check. The session is the actual coat in the closet. Let's make that picture even more concrete with a coat check. You walk up to the cloakroom, hand over your coat, and they give you a small numbered tag. Your coat stays behind the counter. You just walk around with the tag. Later, you show the tag, and they fetch the coat. That tag is your cookie, the session ID. The coat is your session data on the server, and you flash the tag on every single request. So let's trace that flow end to end. You log in with your username and password, and the server, once it's happy, creates a session record and stores it, usually in memory, Redis, or a database. It then replies with a set cookie header carrying a random ID like ABC123, and from that moment on, your browser quietly attaches that cookie to every single request. The cookie itself is just the tag, small, opaque, meaningless on its own. The real data, who you are, what you can do, lives safely on the server. And when you strip away the abstraction, this whole mechanism is just two HTTP headers having a conversation. After login, the server replies with set cookie, handing your browser that session ID along with some safety flags. HTTP only, so JavaScript can't touch it. Secure, so it only travels over HTTPS, same site to blunt cross-site abuse, and a max age, so it eventually expires. Then on every later request, the browser quietly sends cookie session ABC123, and the server looks it up and knows it's you. That's the entire trick. Those flags I just mentioned deserve a closer look because each one shuts a specific door. TP only keeps JavaScript away from the cookie, so an XSS bug can't just read it and walk off with your session. Secure pins it to HTTPS, so it never leaks over plain HTTP. Same site restricts when the browser will attach it to cross-site requests, which is your front line against CSRF. And max age, or expires, decides how long this little ticket stays valid before the browser throws it out. So what do we actually use cookies for in practice? The big one is sessions and logins. That's our main thread here. But they also remember what's in your shopping cart, hold on to preferences like dark mode or language, and feed analytics tools that measure how people move through a site. Worth noting, first-party cookies, the ones your own site sets, are genuinely essential infrastructure. It's the third-party tracking cookies, set by domains you didn't visit, that privacy laws like GDPR are really aimed at. Now let's put sessions side by side with JWTs, which we covered back in Episode 2. The core difference is simple. With sessions, the state lives on your server, and the cookie just carries a random ID pointing to it. With a JWT, the state lives inside the token itself, sitting in the client's pocket. That trade-off ripples outward. Sessions are trivial to revoke but force your servers to share a store, while JWTs scale beautifully across machines but stay valid until they expire, whether you like it or not. Which raises the obvious follow-up. Where exactly does that server-side state live? You've got three realistic options. In-memory is the quickest to set up, just a dictionary in your process. But the moment that server restarts or you spin up a second one, everything falls apart. A real database works and it's durable, but you're paying a disk hit on every single request. That's why Redis or memcached ended up as the default, fast like memory, but shared across every server in your fleet. Now, storing state on the server solves a lot of problems, but it opens up a new question. What happens when someone tries to steal that session? Three threats really matter here. Session hijacking is the direct one. Grab the cookie and you are the user, which is why HTTP only, secure, and HTTPS aren't optional. Access is the sneakier cousin, where malicious JavaScript tries to read your cookies from the page itself. HTTP only shuts that door, and CSRF flips the angle entirely. A malicious site tricks your browser into sending your cookie on a request you never meant to make, which is where same site and anti-CRF tokens earn their keep. With those threats in mind, let's zoom out and trace a session from birth to death. It starts on login, when the server generates a random ID and stores the matching data. That ID rides back to the browser via setCookie, and from then on, every request quietly carries it along so the server can look you up. And when you log out or the timer runs out, the server just deletes its record. And that's the key difference from a JWT. With sessions, logout actually means logged out instantly everywhere. Now, before we move on, let's clear up a few myths I hear all the time. First, no, the cookie itself usually doesn't hold your login data. It's just a random ID pointing to the real record on the server. Second, cookies aren't inherently insecure. With HTTP only, secure, and same site in place, they're rock solid. The risk is misuse, not the technology. And finally, sessions aren't some relic that JWTs killed off. Both are alive and well. And when you need instant revocation, sessions still shine. So how do you actually choose between them? Reach for sessions when you're building a classic server-rendered app, when you need to kill a login instantly, or when it's just you and your backend. Simpler model, fewer moving parts. Reach for JWTs when you're spread across stateless APIs, doing service-to-service calls, powering mobile apps or SPAs, or when you really don't want a shared session store in the mix. Now, let's put names to all of this, like the tools you'll actually run into out there. In Node, it's Express Session. In Python, Flask and Django ship sessions out of the box. In Ruby, Rails handles it natively with either cookie or store-backed sessions. Redis is the classic backend when you need a shared session store, and there are plenty of libraries dedicated to signing and encrypting cookie values. And don't forget your browser's DevTools. The application tab is where you'll inspect every cookie a site sets on you. All right, let's pull it all together. Remember the core mental model. A cookie is just a tag in your pocket, while the actual record of who you are lives on the server. That cookie almost always carries nothing more than a random session ID. The server sets it once. Your browser hands it back on every request. Lock it down with HTTP only, secure, and same site, and you've got the foundation. Sessions give you instant logout. JWTs give you stateless scale. Pick the right tool for the job. So, if you're going the cookie session route, here's your hardening checklist. On the do side, set HTTP only, secure, and same site on every session cookie. Generate IDs that are long and truly random. Rotate the ID the moment someone logs in to shut down fixation attacks, and expire idle sessions on the server, not just in the browser. And the things to avoid: don't stuff personal data into the cookie itself. Don't ship short or guessable IDs. Never send cookies over plain HTTP. And please, don't let sessions live forever. If you want to keep going, the Auth Explained series has companion episodes on JWTs, OAuth 2.0, OpenID Connect, sessions and cookies, and API gateways, each one a piece of the bigger picture. And since we just spent this episode trusting the server with our state, it's worth locking that server down. The SSH Hardening Mastery course over at Dargslan.com courses is a solid next step. Before we wrap, I've got a question for you. After everything we've unpacked, the cookie that's really just a random ID, the server quietly holding the real state, where do you land? Are you Team Sessions or still Team JWT? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know which model clicks for the way you build. And that's a wrap on the Auth Explained series. We've walked through JWTs, OAuth, OIDC, and now sessions and cookies, 4 pieces that together give you a real mental model for how the modern web handles identity. If any of this clicked, hit subscribe so you don't miss whatever I dig into next, and you can find everything else over at dargslan.com. Thanks for watching.